the golden days of electronics, when hobbyists built their first radios, when home computing was novel and technology stores were few and far between, there was one name on many minds: RadioShack. Founded in 1921, it became more than a retailer. It was an icon of accessible tech. But by 2015, this pioneer was filing for Chapter 11. Not once, but twice.
RadioShack has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy following...
RadioShack has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. RadioShack has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection under the U.S. Bankruptcy Code.
This is the rise and fall of RadioShack. RadioShack began in the early 20th century, selling amateur radio equipment and components to electronics enthusiasts. Over decades, it grew, expanded into toys, audio, early personal computers like the TRS-80, mobile phones, and a vast catalog of parts and accessories. In its heyday, RadioShack had thousands of storefronts across the US and held a special place in tech culture. But even as technology advanced, the retail world around it shifted. Big box electronics stores, e-commerce, changing consumer behavior, RadioShack's model depended heavily on physical stores, face-to-face sales, and being the go-to for small parts and accessories. That model had strengths, but vulnerabilities too. By the early 2010s, RadioShack was under increasing pressure. Sales were falling, losses were accumulating. In 2013, the company reported being unprofitable. Its condition concerning enough that major moves were attempted to reverse the course. One major issue was overexpansion of stores. RadioShack had too many outlets, many located near each other, leading to revenue cannibalization and high costs of operating, rent, staffing, and maintenance. Another problem? Its product mix. By 2014, cell phones and accessories made up around half of RadioShack's revenue, but margins in that category were shrinking. Meanwhile, competition from online retailers, Amazon and the like, and big box stores was increasing. The parts, the hobbyists, and DIY electronics backbone of its earlier years were no longer sufficient to offset decline elsewhere. Leadership kept changing, different CEOs, shifting strategies, but things kept getting worse. Creditors began placing restrictions on store closures. Attempts to close underperforming stores were stymied by lenders. By early February 2015, it was already over. On February 5th, 2015, RadioShack filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the US courts. At the time, it had roughly 4,000 plus US stores. The plan: sell somewhere between 1,500 and 2,400 stores to an affiliate of Standard General, its largest shareholder, and close the rest. Part of this strategy involved a partnership with Sprint. Many of the sold stores would become co-tenants or store-within-store arrangements with Sprint, where Sprint would occupy a part of the stores selling wireless services. Joe Magnica, then CEO, said, "These steps are the culmination of a thorough process intended to drive maximum value for our stakeholders." Also, the company arranged for $285 million liquidity from its current lender group to keep operations going during the reorganization. After the sale and closures, the brand limped forward under a restructured ownership. Standard General via its affiliate General Wireless. Sprint co-tenant stores started converting existing RadioShack locations to include Sprint services, in many cases taking over significant portions of the space. Joe Magnica stepped down as CEO in April 2015, saying, "I am pleased with Judge Shannon and the court's decision to approve Standard General's bid for RadioShack assets." Magnica said, "This option provides an opportunity for RadioShack to continue operating as a private company with fewer stores, preserving a number of jobs. I am proud to have been associated with such an iconic brand and to have been part of the hardworking team at RadioShack. Still, many stores were shuttered. The physical footprint was dramatically reduced. The company tried rebranding some stores, improving store layouts, pushing more modern displays, but mounting challenges remained. Despite restructuring, RadioShack was not out of the woods. On March 8, 2017, General Wireless Operations Incorporated, the operator of RadioShack brand post-2015, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection a second time. They announced plans to close about 200 stores and were evaluating options for the remaining 1,300 locations. Dean Rogers, CEO at the time, said, "In 2016, we reduced operating expenses by 23%, while at the same time saw a gross profit dollars increase 8%. But he also admitted that recent poor performance in the mobility, cellular/wireless segment was dragging everything down. The partnership with Sprint that was supposed to be a lifeline wasn't delivering as expected." He said, "For a number of reasons, we have concluded that the Chapter 11 process represents the best path forward for the company." Let's chart the deeper causes behind RadioShack's decline, beyond the headlines. First, they had too many stores and too many costs. At its peak, the store count was massive. By 2014 to 2015, maintaining thousands of storefronts, many underperforming, was unsustainable. Rent, staffing, leases, inventory, all fixed or semi-fixed costs, ate up margins. Attempts to close them earlier were blocked by creditors or constrained by existing financial agreements. Dependency on a shrinking product category. Cell phones and accessories became a large slice of sales, but the margins on those products were getting squeezed. Wireless carriers cut margins, online pricing undercut retail, the value proposition shifted. When wireless sales faltered, the whole business suffered. Failure to adapt fast enough to digital and consumer behavior changes. The rise of Amazon, big box stores, online parts suppliers eroded what made RadioShack unique. They tried to modernize stores, improve displays, reformat outlets, but the structural shift was huge, and many of their competitors were already further ahead. Creditors, financial constraints, and poor decisions. Some lenders prevented closures, hurting efforts to cut costs. Also, as losses piled up, financial pressures limited flexibility. The Standard General deal in 2015 preserved some stores, but left many liabilities unresolved. In 2017, debt levels and obligations still constrained the company's ability to pivot. Finally, partnerships that didn't pay off. The deal with Sprint seemed promising, greater wireless presence, more foot traffic, but it didn't deliver enough profitability. On the one hand, it tied RadioShack to mobility segment volatility. On the other, co-tenant or sublease setups can be complex, costly, and uneven. When wireless device sales slumped or margins compressed, that anchor became a liability. What followed was a sharp contraction, from over 4,000 stores around 2015 down to about 1,300 by 2017. Many storefronts closed forever. Corporate operations powered down. RadioShack emerged from the 2017 bankruptcy primarily as a digital-first brand, plus dealer/franchise network, holding only a handful of company-owned stores. By 2018, RadioShack was largely online, with few physical stores, and its path forward depended heavily on licensing, partnership, and brand recognition, rather than mass retail dominance. More recently, in May 2023, the Unicommer Group, based in El Salvador, acquired the RadioShack brand and associated rights. Unicommer is a longtime franchisee in Latin America and the Caribbean, so this was more than a rescue. It was an absorption into a global franchise operator. Under Unicommer's ownership, the brand has relaunched its website in the US, is operating in some territories and selling through online channels and partner markets. What can we learn from RadioShack's story? Legacy doesn't guarantee relevance. Being an iconic brand helps, but without adapting, any company is bound to fail. Strategic partnerships are double-edged. Entering deals with other companies can offer lifelines, but can also weaken you further. Last, e-commerce and consumer expectations shift fast. Once online platforms took over, consumers expected convenience, selection, and price, leaving RadioShack behind.